All right, welcome to another episode of Medicine Mondays. Yours truly, Dr. Davis-Pierre. We have a special guest. This is probably one of the most requested guests here on the show. My podcast listeners know this voice very well, as she is the introductory voice of the Lunch and Learn with Dr. Barry podcast. Make sure you are subscribed to both. And today we are going to have an amazing conversation coming on the backs of the momentum of talking with Nick Richardson, talking with Cheryl Poe. And Nick gave me an idea, say, hey, you know what? Let's talk about the husband and wife perspective, right? As we're raising an autistic child. So like, who better, right? To talk about raising an autistic child than yours truly, Maria Davis-Pierre. Maria, thank you again, honey, lovey. Thank you for joining this week's episode of Medicine Mondays.
Thank you for having me, my love. I'm happy to be here.
This is a different conversation because typically when we bring you on, we're highlighting autism in Black, right? And that's, obviously there's definitely benefits of highlighting autism in Black. Y'all should know that. But I wanted to kind of have this conversation because this is a conversation that's not had often. I'm not going to say it's never been had, right? But it's not had often. The couple's interaction when we talk about raising an autistic child, a lot of times it's really spoken from one perspective versus the other. We had Nick on here. He talked about it from the Black father's perspective. We had Cheryl Poe on here kind of speak about just what it means to advocate in the background when there are forces, whether it be school related, whether it be politically related, that make it harder to raise an autistic child. But you know what? Like, what better way to, again, kind of tip it off and talking about like, what is it as a couple? Like, and what are some of the dynamics that typically have to kind of, yin and yang when, well, just raising a child in general, but more importantly, definitely raising an autistic child.
Yeah, I think when it comes to our community, the Black community, it's only seen from one perspective over the other because a lot of people think that we're not together, that Black families are not couples or not co-parenting, not working together. So we typically see it a lot from the white side, right? And we don't have too many people in the community that are, standing firm on, yes, we are working together as a unit, even if we're not together. And even so, when we do say these things, it's not widespread, right? So people like to have the idea that Black fathers aren't present. I mean, when, you did the video, the reel on our page, it went super viral because people are like, oh my God, a Black dad is talking. So I think in our community.
And that's sad that a video like that would have to go viral because it's so not seen, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. And you were talking about your perspective as working together as a unit. And that's really what we do together. We work together as a unit. I think ours is a little bit different because I am autistic as well. So that adds another layer into our relationship and how we have to not only work with each other, but how we then work with our children. So yeah, I'm happy to sit here and tell everybody a little bit of our business. I don't like to tell too much, but we'll tell a little bit of our business today.
I think we should start from the beginning because I think a lot of times, especially for the parents, they don't usually come to the finish line at the same time, right? And what I mean by that is when a diagnosis is, being worked upon, when a diagnosis is final, say, yep, your child is autistic. A lot of times the realization of what that means, both parents, unfortunately, usually don't run into the same end goal at the same time. When our daughter's first diagnosed, right, and we talk about it a lot, I want you to talk a little bit about like what it meant for you, especially as a mother, and coming to that like end goal, that fruition to say, all right, yes, my daughter is autistic. Now I have work to do. And what did it mean to you as a wife, like when that diagnosis first came around?
So for me, I think it's also a little bit different because of my background as a clinician. So before she got her diagnosis, I had already knew she was autistic just from seeing the characteristics, from knowing the DSM, knowing the work that it takes to get that process of the diagnosis. So I had already, in my mind, by the time she formally got the paperwork, I had already made in my mind that she was autistic and knew that the work needed to be done, which is why I was working so hard to get that paperwork. And I tell this story often. For me personally, it wasn't like, oh my God, she's autistic. And I guess now we know that because I'm also autistic. So I saw a lot of myself in her. So for me, it wasn't something that I was like down and out about. I was more frustrated with the processes and thinking of that, more frustrated with you as a physician who wasn't there where I was and like, hey, we really need to get on this, but you caught up. So that was good. So as I think it was more of the wife side of seeing our outsiders of, our friends and our family and you that wasn't where I was and was like, how is this going to harm my child? How is this going to impact my child in the long term, knowing that she is autistic and knowing that there's certain things that we need to do? Is people not believing or constantly trying to prove she's not or whatever that people are doing it, how is that going to impact her environment? Because I'm trying to raise a child who has no shame, who's proud of who she is, who doesn't have to second guess who she is with her diagnosis. And then the people around her are doing that. What does that mean for me? So I think as a wife and as a mother, that was my perspective with it.
It's interesting. I like that you kind of touched on the fact that I'm a therapist, right? So from a diagnostic perspective, right, I kind of saw the signs and symptoms, right? I talk about this as a physician. As a physician, I joke when people say like, oh, my doctor only spent a couple of minutes with me in the office and then he wrote medication, he went on his way. And it's because as a physician, I don't need the 15 minutes, right, to diagnose the cold, to diagnose the back pain, to diagnose the ailment. I don't need all 15 minutes. And when you're on the outside looking in, you think the expert needs all 15 minutes to do the whole diagnosis. And I can see how, especially you being an expert, being frustrated because you don't need all 15 minutes to get to the end goal. You're like, I already got this. I already know what we need to do. But unfortunately, because you're the expert and majority of people around you, especially when you talk about friends, family members, even myself, we're not, it's going to take us the 15 minutes. And I can see how you can be frustrated because it's taken someone 15 minutes to get to somewhere where you got the 3, right? And so I love that relationship because it happens all the time in medicine. And I always tell my patients, don't be mad at your doctor because your doctor got it in 3 minutes. Right. And the same vice versa. I can't be mad at my patient because my patient is upset at me because I got it in 3 minutes, but they needed all 15. So I do love that from the expert lens. Right. And I think that's important because when you are the expert and you know what needs to be done, you also understand that time is money. Right. You understand that like, man, we got to get these like in Lunch Learn Community, Medicine Money Watchers. Y'all know she did me some educating. She educated me very quickly that, hey, doc, I need you to get on this board very quickly because we got to get some services going. We got to get some things going. And you kind of have to let me lead this ship right now because I know where it needs to go to. Like, I do want to pin you down. So as a wife, right, what are some of your thoughts, right, when you're trying to educate your husband, right, when you're trying to educate mom, dad, sister, brother, friends? Focus just on the wife now, but like as a wife, what were some of the lessons that you had to go through to learn to say, all right, this is how I can get my husband caught up to speed? Because we know there are a lot of mothers out here who find it difficult getting their significant others, the fathers of their children, up to speed as well.
I think one of the lessons that you definitely taught me was that if I'm saying it in my head, you're not a mind reader and I have to verbalize it to you. I cannot have the expectation that you should know. So I had to really start verbalizing a lot of things that were frustrating me or upsetting me because my expectation of you was different because you are a physician. And I couldn't grasp like, why is it taking you so long to get here when you are also a healthcare provider? So why are you not understanding that this is the reality for our child? So it was a lot of frustration because I was looking at you from a professional standpoint instead of a father who had to understand, this is my child, this is my first child, this is all new to me, I don't know what's going on, they don't teach me this in school, so this is all new to me. So I really had to really be open and honest with you and also check myself on some things and allow you to have the grace for your feelings, and understand that, hey, just because I'm here doesn't mean he's necessarily going to always be here. I'm going to continue to do what I need to do for our child and also educate him in the process.
And what I love about that, especially when I talked to Nick and we kind of discussed like some of our thoughts from the father's perspective, right? We go from being, the quote unquote protector and, the person who's supposed to kind of be in charge. And then all of a sudden we're in a position where we're not in charge anymore. And we need our wives to kind of lead us. And it's so funny because his wife's, I'm not sure if she's a therapist, but I know she's in that field. It was almost like a mirror. And we kind of talked about having to kind of just sit back and let our wives to lead us. And quite often, especially when we talk to couples, there's discordance of who should be doing the leading, who should be kind of manning the ship, who should be giving the direction and pointing us in the direction that really at the end of the day is best for the child. Obviously, right? It was easy for me to do because, you were like, hey, I'm doing this. That's why I love that you were saying, hey, I have to take care of my child. And I know that what the services my child is going to need. And even though this book is telling me that I have to wait at 3, I'm not going to do that. Right. And, I thank you for all the time because I always say, all right, where would my daughter be at right now if we waited for some guideline before going to therapy and occupational therapy? Where would she be at right now? By the time y'all hear this, she'll be turning 12 for us, right? So that's why I love the fact that as the mother, you say, hey, you know what? I got to protect my baby, right? I got to go down this journey and I'm going to go down this journey alone while I'm waiting for people to kind of catch up. I see that a lot, especially with the community. The mothers are there, they're rocking it. Right. They are going down this journey and they have no problem. I don't know if you've seen that picture. There's this one picture where someone's standing above the child and arrows are being thrown at it, but they're protecting the child from all the arrows. And that's the kind of role that you served as a mother.
Yeah. And, I had no problem doing that. But I think a lot for us mothers is that we do want to not have to do that all the time. We do want to be able to be like, hey, this is where we're at. And you take some of those arrows as well. And I think as time went on, you understood that because it is a lot for the mother to be the sole, especially when you have a spouse or a partner in the house with you and you're the one that's solely doing this. You're the sole one advocating. You're the sole one going to IEP meetings. You're the sole one advocating in healthcare settings, right? That can be a lot on top of every other role that we have to do. And I think sometimes it's just like, dang, can I get a break? Dang, can I get a moment? Kids are always mommy, 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 mommy. And we say it all the time. We could be sitting on the couch. They will bypass him and come straight to me and be like, mommy, mommy, mom. I'm like, you didn't see this man? Go talk to daddy. So sometimes we do just want that moment to just be, So luckily, we have gotten to that point. But in the beginning, it was a lot to carry.
Especially from the couple dynamic and the couple relationship. What was it about raising a child who's autistic that added extra layers of either comfort or discomfort, right? What was it about? Because obviously, again, raising a child comes with its things, right? But what was it about raising an autistic child in a relationship that you're like, wow, this is definitely something I got to keep on working on myself as well as my relationship with my spouse?
With Malia being our first child, this was all new to us. We never knew what to expect with any kind of parenting, right? And then to come in and have the expectations of who your child was going to be and then get something different and then have to readjust to that. Many people don't know Malia was non-vocal for the first 4 years of her life. For me, the thing that was a lot on me was not knowing, trying to anticipate. And I'm a helicopter mom. Barry will tell you I am still a helicopter mom, okay? And I'm very much anticipating, what do you need and what can I do? And Barry is very chill. He's very, we'll get it. She'll let us know. It'll come to us. And I'm like, no, we need to know, no. And us having those different type of personalities are a balance. But at the same time, I'm like, I need to know. I need to know what to do. So that was very frustrating, not knowing what my child needing and knowing how to communicate with her at the time. I wasn't Autism in Black platform back then. I was still trying to figure things out as well. So I'm trying to understand, well, how do I maneuver this? And at the same time, feeling like, well, he's not really as invested as I am. So I'm really figuring this out on my own type of deal. When it wasn't that, you're just a different personality. So having to figure that out as well, because I'm very much, oh my God, the world is ending. We need to figure it out type of person. And Barry is very much like, it's going to work out.
What I love about that is you talked about some of the personality traits that are needed, right? Again, we have pretty much opposite personality traits and just kind of a lot of our approaches, whether it be to work, whether it be to the life, whether it be raising kids. It's just different vibes and different, ways we grew up and all that. Yeah, we got that aspect of it. How do you feel about the personality traits that was either beneficial or may have caused, a little bit of, a little bit of roughing of the feathers, especially as a spouse and as a mother, right? Because again, I think that's a dynamic that doesn't get talked about a lot. When we kind of mentioned it with Nick, was having to grow into the role of a mother of an autistic child, but then also having to grow into the role of a wife with an autistic child, right? Because it is two separate, kind of journeys that one person typically has to run into.
I would say that us having different personality traits is very beneficial. I would say very rarely are Barry and I having the same feeling at the same time. If I am upset about something that has happened at the school and I'm ready to go and knock everybody's stuff off their desk and I'm telling him, hey, I'm going to jail tomorrow. These people are, I'm sending an email, I'm doing this. He's like, well, let me ask some questions. He's like, let's figure this out type of person. In my mind, I already have the answer. And the answer is I'm going to go and, do what I got to do. And so he's like, let me figure this out type of thing. And it could be twofold in that same instance that I'm feeling like, I really hate your personality right now. Why do you got to be like this? And also be like, oh, thank you for not letting me go to jail that day. So it could be this, the same instance and have both of the feelings of how our personalities are different. And I think for us, it happens to work because like I said, we're rarely feeling the same feeling. And I think a lot of times Barry's able to calm me down to be able to see that different perspective. And then in other instances, I'm able to be like, hey, this isn't a time for you to be chill. This is a time we need it's time to ruffle some feathers here. And he will begrudgingly agree. And then later on be like, oh, thank you for making sure we advocated in that way. So I think it just happens to balance out for us in that perspective. But there are many times that I'm just so frustrated that he is just so chill and like nothing is bothering him. And I'm like, why are you not reacting how I am feeling? I need you to go in there and assert some 6'2" power and let them know that we're not the ones to play with. And he's like, I'm not doing that.
What I love about that is we do this all the time, especially when, raising our daughter and recognizing, right? Like, all right, there's times where we got to turn up and there's times where like we got to like, okay, we got to hit them with the profession. Because again, there's things that as the parent, right, you just want what's best for your child, right? Like as a dad, I want like my daughter and my son and my other daughter, like I want all of them, right, to be able to kind of go through life and not necessarily have to deal with unnecessary stress, because you're going to have to deal with stress. Stress is coming, right? You're not running from that. You're not hiding from it. But I understand that when this diagnosis comes and they have to kind of navigate life with this diagnosis, I understand that as a father, I got to try this. All right, what can I do to, again, take some of these arrows off my child? Like, what can I do, right, to kind of remove some of the burden and stress? Because imagine if like my wife is hot and I'm also hot, right? Like when does my wife get time to relax and kind of come down, right? Like when will that occur if we're both kind of in that same level of space? So sometimes you almost have to take this kind of contrarian position, right? Because I understand, like, okay, I'm going to need her to kind of come down just a little bit right here, because at the end of the day, it's going to be what's best for Malia, right? At the end of the day, it's going to be what's best for Brooklyn. Right? At the end of the day, it's going to be what's best for Davis, right? And that's why I love the relationship that we have, right? That it just continues to grow and continues to be new. And it's infectious because, when we do have to do autism and Black related things, people can just kind of see that, like jumping off the camera, right? They can kind of recognize like, Barry is kind of wild, right? But he must be common red, like, because they can kind of see. And what I hope is that it also kind of translate to the child, right? So the child can kind of see, right, one parent kind of really too chill and may let me touch that burning stove, and one parent is like, get away from the kitchen. Like, I don't even want you, don't forget the stove, get away from the kitchen. And hopefully that the child can kind of recognize like, all right, I need to find a happy median here, because at the end of the day, right, the destination is the same. And I think that is what has been so beneficial, right, for the relationship as a husband and wife, as mother and father, is that we recognize that we both got to get to the same destination. There's a couple of different ways to do it. There's a couple of different detours to get there. But because we know that the end goal is the same, it definitely works. And that's what I always kind of champion for those couples out here who may have the same destination, but maybe a little bit further along than the other person.
Yeah. And I would say something else that we also had to learn is that we had to keep our love burning outside of children as well. So making sure that we are not just thinking of ourselves as mom and dad. For us to be able to communicate effectively with one another, for us to, be able to be around each other and do all these things, we had to have, our own relationship outside of parenting. And that's something that, we work hard on daily as well. Not always being in mom and dad role, but being in husband and wife role as well for our relationship.
I think that's important because I remember I asked, if not Nick, it was the fellas, right? I asked them, I said, hey guys, like, all right, fathers, like I hear all the stuff that you guys do for your child, right? And we love it. But what do you guys do for yourselves? And a lot of them were like, not really. Like they couldn't even answer it because it does become this onus where we do forget, right? When you are serving the role as father, you knock that out the park, right? But when you're serving the role as husband, right, or just significant other, right, like you allow that to falter, right? And at the end of the day, it's just one of the many pillars when you're raising a child, right? So if you have that relationship with your significant other, whether you're married or not, or living together or not, understanding that like there is still a relationship between mother and father that needs to be there, right? Again, that needs to be cordial, that needs to understand like what the goal is at hand, or it's going to falter in the end. I love that because you say, yeah, you got to have a relationship outside of the kids, right? We're not forgetting about the kids, but you got to have that relationship outside of them if you want the relationship with the kids to also grow as well.
Exactly. And I can remember when we just had the one child, we just had Malia, and then we had the twins, and I was like, I can't leave my kids. I need to always be here. I don't trust people. And Barry's like, you need to go and have some time on your own. He was literally pushing me to go out and do stuff. And I was like, no, they're not ready yet. Maybe when they're 5. And he was like, you're not waiting 5 years for these twins to be going out. So he was really also pushing me and seeing that I needed self-care. And I do the same for him even now currently, because he never likes to take off. He's always working, doing something. We went on a trip to Jamaica and the man was, I was like, no computers allowed. It's just a vacation. He still found a way to do some business in there, but it wasn't what he would normally do. So I had to stay on him. He has to stay on me. And we are making sure that each other gets the self-care also outside of us being husband and wife too, because we don't want to lose ourselves. And there's so many benefits of having a partner, a co-parent who cares about your well-being. And I really enjoy that we do that for each other.
Obviously we don't want to give them all of the business. Maybe we'll like write a book or something. I don't know. What I want to do, especially before we get out of here, right, is for the couples who may be watching this, listening to this, and trying to figure out, like, okay, you know what? I love hearing what, Barry and Maria are saying. I love the relationship. Like, what are some, like, actionable tips that you would have wished someone could have given us when we first, like, got the diagnosis? And, like, what are some actionable tips that, again, we don't have to give them too many, right? Like, that you would say, man, like, if they could have just told me, hey, this, and that, we could have been a lot further along.
Oh, one is, I think, effective communication, communicating with your partner where you're at, your fears, your concerns. I think oftentimes people are either afraid or have shame in what they're feeling, so they don't voice those concerns. But your co-parent, your partner should be someone that you trust and can share those emotions with. I feel like if I would have shared a lot earlier on with Barry, he would have had a different insight to how I was feeling and acted a lot faster and got in a lot faster, because he would have been like, oh, my wife this is really on her, and I want to go in and make sure it's okay. Another thing that we had to learn is that what I've learned about men is that they like to fix a situation. Like if I'm venting something, Barry's like, okay, well, this is how I can fix it. I have to start off our conversations a lot of times with, this isn't a situation to fix. This is a situation that I'm just venting on. I just need you to listen. I don't want you to fix it. I just need you to listen. So that's another thing, because a lot of times our partners are definitely thinking about, how can I fix this for her? How can I make it better for her? When we're just wanting you to listen and provide some emotional support. So if you have to voice that concern in the beginning and be like, hey, this is a venting session. This isn't anything that you need to come out with a 32-page plan with on how you can solve the issue. I just need you to listen. I think those definitely help with, strengthening a marriage, and also, again, taking that time away from parenting and being the couple, and taking that time away from the couple and being just who am I as Maria, right? So understanding a lot of those things and making sure you have a therapist that can, you can go to for couples, for family, for individual, because, I'm always for therapy. I wouldn't be a therapist if I didn't say this. And, you don't have to have problems to be going to a therapist. You can go to a therapist to figure out, some things, to talk about your feelings, to have that neutral party. So those are definitely things that I would tell any couple, and then any couple that's raising a child with a disability, because that just adds another layer in, because oftentimes we don't know what to do. And just give yourself that grace, because nothing's perfect. Barry and I aren't perfect. I know a lot of you see us on our platforms and you see how we engage. We've been married a long time. What is it? 16 years, 17 years?
It's a long time, y'all.
It's either 16 or 17. So we've been married. We've been together even longer. So, there's never a serious moment in the Pierre household. He makes sure of that. It's always very playful. But, even when we have our disagreements, we are able to talk it out. We're not a type that's going to stay mad and go to bed mad and be mad for weeks and not communicate. One, because that's just not the type of individual I am. We're going to talk this thing out.
That's definitely not me, because I'm going to sleep. I'll be like, all right, you still, all right.
Yeah, we forgot what you like. We supposed to be mad. Oh, okay. So, just all of those things, and understand that, there's an effort into any type of relationship. So yeah, those are the things I would say. And don't think of us as this perfect couple that's not making mistakes and doing things wrong, because we're figuring this thing out daily as well.
Yeah, and I think, just to give some point, especially from the husband and father's perspective, understanding that there is goals, there's aspirations, there's thoughts, there's things you might have had pre-planned, but understanding that this journey is not your own, right? This journey has partners. This journey may have a different destination, right? And you may just need to be that conductor who just kind of gets to the new destination, even though you don't know how it's going to be, what it's going to look like. Understanding that you may have to serve as a pillar of force for your wife, for your child, to get them there, right? And not allow that concern of uncertainty allow you to be absent, right? Like, you got to be present, right? You can't run away from the situation, because now you don't know what it's going to look like at the end of that road. And I think that's one thing I would definitely hark back on and say, all right, am I really tripping about what's really going on? Or am I actually scared because I don't know if I can lead, right? Like, and I had to talk to the dads. Is it just like, everything's really so overwhelming, or is it the fear? And because I don't really know how to talk about fear, I don't really know how to talk about being scared, that I'm going to exhibit it in another fashion, right? And when we talk about the child, when we talk about the mother, right, like, you got to understand that they're also going through their things as well. So you can't necessarily take anything personal. Like, you can't take it to heart. Like, you got to understand at the end of the day, right, it's for that child. And more importantly, at the end of the day, making sure you're taking care of the significant other or the mother of the child, whatever that relationship is, because at the end of the day, the kid is there. And I think that was a big one for me. Like, you kind of hit on a lot of the, also salient points that I think would definitely help others get to the destination.
For our Black women who are with Black men, especially because, how society treats our Black men, there's an added burden that they carry. I make it a point to make sure I'm just as on top of Barry's mental health and watching out for signs and bringing things to his attention and making sure that he knows this is a safe space for him not to have to always have that defense and guard up. This is a safe space for you to really be vulnerable and say the things that you're afraid of, and cry if you need to, and do all of these things that you need to do. And I don't think our Black men get enough of that. So make sure you're doing that as well, because it's so needed. Because a lot of times they do feel like they just need to be that strength for the family, that I need to be able to make sure that everything is good, no matter how my mental health is, matter how my health is doing. So make sure we're checking in with our Black male spouses as well to make sure that they are okay.
Love it, love it. So again, before we get out of here, I like to, give some time to give yourself a little shout out. Like, where can people find you? Where can people follow you? Unless this is the first time you're watching the Medicine Monday show or you're listening to Lunch Later Dr. Berry podcast, you kind of already know this spiel, but we got to do it, right? You know how it goes.
You can go to autismandblack.org, which is our website. You can follow me on Instagram. For those of you who've listened, that's my most active platform. So you can follow me on Autism and Black on Instagram, Autism and BLK on Facebook. And we have a Autism and Black podcast that you can listen to. What else? We have a summit coming up. So if you are a speaker and wanting to have a proposal, go to that link that's in my bios on all my social media and just check us out and see what we're doing, because we have some great things in store for the rest of the year and the start of 2025, which Barry already has us planning.
All right. Love it. Thank you again for joining. Thank you for giving the perspective as a couple, just kind of talking with Nick and Cheryl, like, oh, you know what? We should have a couples discussion, right? Because I just think it's not enough. It's being had, right? Because I'll never be one to be like, oh, it's being had. We just need to have more of it. So thank you again for joining this episode of Medicine Mondays.
Of course.